The kind of magnets Carline makes are called permanent magnets. That is, metals that are magnetic on their own, as opposed to electromagnets, which only become magnetic when electric current flows around them. Permanent magnets are a big business. In 2023, about $38 billion worth of these metals were produced globally. And they're particularly important for clean energy technologies like electric vehicles and wind turbines. Without magnets, these things simply wouldn't work. Why? Well, let's look at an electric vehicle motor. When you turn on the motor, electricity flows into this metallic shaft, creating a magnetic field. That doesn't do much on its own, but look what happens when we add these permanent magnets. Their magnetic fields push against the central magnetic field. That makes the shaft rotate, and that makes the car go. Thanks, magnets. What about a wind turbine? Well, it's just the opposite process. The movement of the blades causes a magnet to spin around a central wire, which creates an electric current in the wire and generates electricity. It's like the motor in reverse. One turns electricity into motion, the other, motion into electricity. So, our magnetic friends spin around happily, making and using clean energy, and everything's great, right? Well, here's the problem.
Most permanent magnets today, used in wind turbines or electric car motors, come from using rare earth metals, typically neodymium.
Rare earths are metals that are only found in the Earth's crust in trace amounts, a few parts per million. And 92% of the world's rare earth magnets come from one place, China.
So it's not like rare earth metals, or neodymium specifically, is only found in China. It's that China has built over years, through government investment and private investment, a whole supply chain all the way from mining to the final product in the cheapest way possible. And that's made it really difficult for any other country to get into the neodymium game.
To see why China made that investment, look no further than the streets of Shanghai. More than half the vehicles sold here in 2024 had electric motors, which need those rare earth magnets to run.
Here in Shanghai, you see all these cars with green license plates, which means that they're EVs. I mean, basically, Chinese EVs are everywhere, and not just in the big cities. The Chinese EV industry is now the biggest in the world. I mean, how was China able to sort of become this incredible EV market? A lot of that has to do with the government. Chinese EV makers can depend on China for the supply chain, rare earths as well as rare earth magnets. Concentrated supply chains allow a lot of EV makers to obtain stable supply and manage their costs. But on the flip side, though, China's dominance of all these materials has given China pricing power, and other countries are vulnerable to policy swings in Beijing.
A small incident in 2010 exposed just how dependent the rest of the world is on Chinese rare earth metal supply. There was a Chinese vessel that was captured by the Japanese Coast Guard because they thought that it had entered Japanese water illegally, and Japan wouldn't release those fishermen. So China threatened Japan, according to some reports, that it will cut off the supply of rare earth metals to the Japanese electronics industry. And that caused a firestorm in the markets. Suddenly, rare earth metal prices skyrocketed, and that created this perception that countries needed to not just think about energy security, but they also needed to think about material security.
In Europe, efforts are underway to find local sources of rare earths. This site in Norway is being explored as a possible source of neodymium and other elements.
We are having the biggest deposit of rare earths in Europe. It's so important because there is absolutely no mining of rare earths in Europe today. And we are totally dependent on the supply from China. The demand is growing. We all need these materials for the future.
But establishing a whole new supply chain is an uphill battle.
This is the entrance to where we are finding the rare earth elements. It's difficult to open a new mine. It's permitting, we have neighbors, and it's very expensive. The first phase will be approximately €1 billion.
This mine won't start producing at scale for more than a decade. and the pace of development of new rare earth mines around the world has been slow.
Of course, it's a big challenge to compete against China, so we have a long way to go.
So new mines could be part of the answer, eventually. But what if this geopolitical problem had a more science-y solution?
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jumana Versace in Doha, Qatar, and this is Bloomberg.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Surveillance.
They say you're in your right if you use Section 122. Why didn't you guys do that from the beginning?
Well, Section 122 only gives you 150 days.
In Section 122, if you use this
that,
now for 150 days, would it be a bridge to 301 or a bridge to 232? What are you thinking more long-term?
You can be the strategist on that.
So just got to tell you one thing. You're not allowed to hire Anne-Marie. She's with us, all right? Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance live every weekday.
My name is Jianping Wan. I'm professor at the University of Minnesota. Magnetism is magic, still is magic to me, same as when I was a college student.
Originally from China, Jianping has been working on a new kind of magnet, and he's been at it for a very long time.
This material I work on for 20 years, and it's called the iron nitride magnet.
Iron and nitrogen, two of the most abundant elements, no rare earths required. A magnet like that could solve the rare earth supply chain problem and be a billion-dollar business.
A nitrogen atom.
But it's not as easy as it sounds. Finding a stable molecular structure for iron nitride is a notoriously tricky problem.
You know, it's a very hard materials to make, and that scares away a lot of people. So that's why I step in. I feel I can solve these problems.
He and his students built these specialized machines from scratch and got to work. By 2013, they were getting good, but not great results.
Performance of this material is still not good enough. I think if you ask anyone to invest to see this material can be replaced rare earth permanent magnet, no one will say yes.
But Jianping was wrong. Investors had magnet fever. He started a company, Niron Magnetics, that secured more than $100 million in funding. But the journey from lab to product was just getting started.
The genesis of Niron was indeed Professor Jianping's work at the University of Minnesota. What we had to figure out then is, well, how are we going to make this and scale the product? Iron nitride is a little bit tricky. It's a real challenge to make and scale a material and do it cost effectively. And so the last 10 years have really been focused around developing a process that is scalable.
We settled on this nanoparticle approach. And how we do that is we start with making iron oxide nanoparticles, basically highly engineered rust.
At this stage, the rust is not terribly magnetic. We have to process it further to take it from the iron oxide phase into the iron nitride. You can see the material becomes much more magnetic. In order to turn it into a magnet, we have to take a further step and take the powder and make it very alignable. And so you can see that the particles form these chains or needles, if you will. This allows us to get the right structure when we compact this material into a finished magnet. Oh, there's a nice one. It's always fun to play with magnets, right?
After years of perfecting this process, Niron says it's about ready to ship. Its first target market is audio, yet another industry with magnets at its core.
In speakers, it's the magnet behind the cone that drives the actual cone to go up and down and vibrate. We recently made an electric guitar. We used that at our ribbon cutting ceremony. What picks up the sound of the vibration of the strings are guitar pickups, and they're made from magnets.
Told you it would make sense later. But beyond cool guitar dads, Niron hopes its magnets can have an impact on all kinds of clean energy technologies. It's raised more than $30 million from car makers like GM and Stellantis, which are interested in using iron nitride for their growing EV lines, something Niron says will be possible in 3 to 5 years. And the company claims that with further development, its magnets could become the strongest permanent magnets ever. But iron nitride does have one major drawback. It tends to lose its magnetism in the presence of other magnets.
The area that's different to, I would say, rare earth materials today is it has more moderate, what we call coercivity, which is this resistance to demagnetization. In speakers, that doesn't really matter because the magnet is static, but in motors, it's spinning, and so it experiences other magnetic fields in the motor.
So many problems. Even now, Nayang still give me the challenge, how can we improve performance? Right now, the performance is still not good enough for all the application. I believe, we need to invest more on the fundamental research.
If Niron gets past these hurdles, its magnets could become essential to the clean energy technologies of the present. But what about the future? Something more sci-fi. Not $1 billion business, but $1 trillion business. Well, there's a magnet for that too.
What we're trying to do is develop fusion technology that we could build around the world as power plants. These types of machines that use very large magnets to basically hold a star. And we're really leveraging new types of magnets to make them smaller, faster, and more powerful.
Founded in 2018, Commonwealth Fusion Systems is the brainchild of some physics nerds with a dream: to finally take fusion from science experiment to real-world power source. And they think their unique magnets are the key to making this happen.
The magnets that we're building are the strongest in the world for their size. Strong enough to actually lift an aircraft carrier if we wanted to try.
All right, let's cut right to it. This is Bloomberg's new show, Primer. Technology is a $1 trillion game. Won, lost, won again, just by backing the right science at precisely the right moment.
My life has been focused on how can you elicit intelligence from brain cells in a dish.
This is the fundamental building block of our fusion technology.
We're doing things that have never been done by anybody, ever.
Everyone is selling the future. If you want to understand what's coming, you'll want to watch Primer, because details matter.
Lasers on.
So do lasers.
There we go.
Oh, and it's on all these lovely channels. Hope you're jotting this down.
People ask me all the time, what is the key to being a really good investor? And I tell them it's to surround yourself with and work with the best investors you can find. On Bloomberg Wealth, I'm going to take you to meet the greatest investors in the world, the people that I would like to have managing my money.
It's 100 years, 80 years, 100 years of dollar strength, so much so that important commodities, gold, oil, are denominated in dollars. I think undoing that will take a long, long time.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Onen, only on Bloomberg.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
So what exactly do magnets have to do with fusion? Buckle up. It's about to get cosmic.
Nuclear fusion, the same reaction that gives the sun its energy.
A nuclear fusion reactor is trying to replicate what the sun does, but on Earth. And that is no small feat. The sun is essentially taking hydrogen and compressing it to make helium. In the process, it produces a lot of energy. But the sun is 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth. I think that's right.
Close enough.
And so its gravitational force is enormous, and it's able to use that gravitational force to compress all that hydrogen into helium.
On Earth, we don't have all that gravity to work with. Luckily, we can use heat instead.
And that's what a tokamak reactor does. It's essentially a bagel-shaped reactor made up of magnets on the outside that hold together hydrogen in the form of plasma that is superheated to 100 million degrees Celsius.
And because plasma has an electric charge, it reacts to magnetic fields, so the magnets can contain it.
The world over the last 50 years has built about 150 tokamaks. We actually understand the physics really well of how these specific devices work, but the engineering of the magnets is really hard.
At MIT, we were running a tokamak that used copper, so magnets made out of copper, that were some of the strongest magnets in the world. And we were getting really good results. But we knew that that magnet technology in that machine of copper wouldn't make a power plant, that you would spend all your energy just running the magnet.
With a copper electromagnet, some energy is always lost to heat because of electrical resistance. You need to pump more electricity through the magnets than the fusion power can create, meaning you end up in the red. So what do? Well, here we need to introduce you to a new kind of magnet, a fabulous, freaky, I freaking love science kind of magnet, the superconductor.
My name is Daniel Davis. I'm a research faculty here at the National High Magnetic Field Lab, and I work on making superconducting magnets.
Superconductors have all kinds of strange properties. Under the right conditions, their magnetic field can actually make them levitate.
We have to cool it down by placing it in liquid nitrogen. It will try to expel the magnetic field around it, and that will lock it in place at a certain height above the superconducting track.
That, in scientific terms, is pretty sweet. But the property that makes them so useful for fusion is right there in the name, superconductor.
It's a material that has zero electrical resistance, so that means it can carry current without generating any heat.
Unlike copper magnets, which lose energy to heat, superconductors don't, which gets your energy investment closer to turning a profit. But there's another problem.
Most of the superconductors that exist are low-temperature superconductors. And when physicists say low, they mean really low.
Like the temperature of outer space.
Like close to absolute zero.
We're talking low.
Like low. Really low.
And it turns out, magnets don't like to be that cold. The extreme temperature limits the strength of their magnetic field. To compensate, you have to make them bigger, way bigger.
No, it takes a lot of work to build something big. It gets very expensive. Like the amount of money you need to spend on something to get just the first one can get very, very expensive.
That's exactly what's happening with ITER, a giant fusion reactor currently under construction in France that uses superconducting magnets. Look at this thing, it's huge. And as a result, it's projected to cost as much as $65 billion. So, to make fusion smaller, cheaper, and more practical, Commonwealth's founders needed a whole new kind of magnet.
The question was, would that material ever happen? And it wasn't until the early 2000s that we could really see that material was going to happen. That there would be a new type of superconductor. And it's not a wire, it's a weird thing, it's a film. And it won the Nobel Prize months after it was discovered.
So this is a material called HTS, or high temperature superconductor. It is literally, it comes out in a tape. It's probably kind of hard to see on the camera. It's very thin. It's actually mostly copper and steel, but there's a very, very, very thin layer inside of this that is high temperature superconducting material.
High temperature, in this case, is still wildly cold, but not quite outer space cold. And that was the breakthrough that Commonwealth needed. Magnets made with this material can create a stronger magnetic field, so they don't have to be so massive.
You can shrink the size of the device by a factor of 10. Basically allows us to make things smaller, which makes things cheaper and makes things faster, to get fusion to a spot where we can make energy from it.
So we're standing at the front of our magnet production line. So this is our very first station in the process where we make our pancakes. And a pancake is a layer of one of the magnets. We insert our superconducting tape into the spiral shape around the pancake. This is actually one of many stacks that we have in the factory of completed pancakes that we're now getting ready to make into full magnets.
Is it satisfying to be like, yes, we got a full stack?
Oh yeah, when we first moved into the factory, it took us about 20 days to complete a pancake. Now we're actually producing one a day.
Once completed, the magnets get stuck into this cooling chamber for testing. Liquid nitrogen and helium are pumped in to get the magnets cold. Then a super strong electric current is turned on.
So we're going to put in up to 35,000 amps of current into the magnet. And to put that in perspective, you charge your phone at night with 1 amp. So we could charge 35,000 cell phones all at once with this equipment.
Do you ever feel nervous walking under a sled?
No, we did a lot of structural analysis and no safety issue there.
Do you know how much that weighs?
A lot.
Nuclear fusion has been worked on for decades, but it's only really in the last 2 decades that private industry has become serious about investing in nuclear fusion. In that period, about $7 or $8 billion of private investment has gone into about a dozen nuclear fusion startups around the world.
One of these investors is Breakthrough Energy Ventures, a VC firm started by Bill Gates to fund early-stage clean energy startups.
So Breakthrough is very bullish on nuclear fusion. We have invested in 7 nuclear fusion companies. The first one that we did, and the one that's received the most attention, is Commonwealth Fusion Systems. They raised, I think, $100 million in their first round and raised nearly $2 billion in their Series B. The idea that tokamaks are still experimental and risky and a long ways off, it's really not true. The old joke about fusion is that it's 20 years away and it always will be. That is absolutely not the case with fusion at this point.
In this room right here, the tokamak will be built. So these big orange structures here are assembly tooling, so temporary stands. We'll put all the magnets up on them, and then we'll bring that machine together over that center white hole in the middle, and that's where the final kind of tokamak location will be.
If its demonstration tokamak works, Commonwealth plans to complete its first commercial fusion plant by the early 2030s. But it's important to throw some cold water on all of this, because fusion power is still basically an unproven technology.
The biggest challenge for nuclear fusion right now is to be able to show first that it can create net power, which is power plants that produce more power than they consume in creating nuclear fusion reactions. That's only been shown to work in a lab setting a few times now. It has never been shown in a commercial scale plant.
Even if Commonwealth's magnets tip the scales towards net power, building a full-scale fusion industry is likely to take decades.
So nuclear fusion evokes this idealism because the potential of free, clean energy is enormous. But it is also an idealism because the dream of actually having that is quite far still.
It's difficult to say if all of these very important magnets will help solve the environmental and geopolitical problems we're facing. But one thing's clear. Magnets are not static things. They're evolving, they're improving. We're manipulating the very molecular structure of these materials to make them stronger and better. That's a trajectory we've seen before with things like lithium-ion batteries and computer chips. It's a trajectory that has the potential to create huge businesses and a lot of change.
Magnetism, it's fascinating. It's been a long-time love of mine. It's invisible forces at play that can make such a big impact on the world.
Was it easy to get the pandas to come back to Washington, D.C.? Did the Chinese say, we have some extra pandas, we don't know what to do with them, we're going to give them to you?
Well, it was a little more difficult than that. It probably took us, it was about over the course of a year where we had conversations with our colleagues in China, and we were able to get pandas here very quickly. I think it's a testament to the relationship we've built over decades, to the conservation success that we've had, here with our pandas and our panda program. And so it was a lot of conversations, but I think we always knew in the end that we did want pandas at the National Zoo.
How many pandas are there in the entire world?
So this is incredible because this is all due to this panda program, and this is so important. So when we started with giant pandas 50 years ago, there were fewer fewer than 1,000 pandas in the world, right? We're talking in the wild and zoos, fewer than 1,000. And decades later, there are close to 2,000 pandas in the wild now. Actually, I think a little over 1,800. There are over 700 pandas in breeding centers. So as part of this program, we have tripled the number of pandas on the planet.
But still a small number of pandas.
Because of this program, there are more pandas on the planet, more quality panda habitat in the wild, and pandas have gone from being endangered to being vulnerable.
I'm Alex Rodriguez. And I'm Jason Kelly. And we're back with more episodes of our show, The Deal.
The theme of this season, On the Road. We're bringing you more behind-the-scenes conversations with the biggest names in sports, business, and culture, like Melody Hobson.
I started to study women's sports like an 11-year-old studies baseball statistics, and I got dangerous in seeing up arrows.
Susie Wolf.
When you're competing, you're not thinking about any fear or any worries of what could happen.
Josh Harris.
You can't do a good deal with a bad person.
Jay Batt.
At the end of the day, there's never been a better time to be a student athlete.
And more. Stay tuned.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
What trade does is it meets a consumer demand. Consumer demand is not weakening. China supplies a little over 30% of what we eat, wear, and consume. That's unlikely to change anytime soon. I think that supply will find new homes potentially, but our reliance as a global economy on Chinese manufacturing is unlikely to change fundamentally anytime soon.
Don't miss the opening trade live every weekday.
You up to the minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Amber Verdern at the G7 in Alberta, Canada. This is Bloomberg.
This is a simulation of Pong, the iconic 1970s arcade game where you use this paddle to stop this ball from getting past you. It's a pretty simple game for us humans to learn, and as of quite recently with advancements in AI, computers can learn it too. But today, Pong has a new kind of player, not a computer, nor a human. A cluster of living human brain cells on top of a silicon chip can play Pong. Yep, researchers in a lab taught a tiny clump of neurons to, in a sense, play this video game. But it's more than just a game. Some believe merging biology with computing could upend our approach to artificial intelligence. AI is a massive, often volatile, global market, with people looking all over for a competitive edge. In 2025, private sector companies teamed up to invest more than $500 billion in AI infrastructure alone. But what if the building blocks of that infrastructure include living human brain cells, with the promises and challenges of our own biology? Sounds like sci-fi, right? Well, we're kind of on our way.
Science fiction talked about this.
I love thinking about the Hollywood stuff. Like, are we really computers? Are computers really human?
My life has been focused on how can you elicit intelligence from brain cells in a dish. I've got a pretty broad background. I did some work starting with cognitive psychology, neuropsychology, and then eventually moving into neuroscience.
Brett Kagan is the Chief Scientific Officer at Cortical Labs in Melbourne, Australia. They made a name for themselves when they got their neurons to play Pong in 2022. They called it Dish Brain.
Yeah, let's just set up and see how it goes. Maybe we'll all be in for a surprise.
Quick timeout. Before we go any further, it might be worth understanding why companies like Cortical Labs are blending living neurons with synthetic systems. Compared to traditional machine learning, brains need far less training data to understand real-life environments and new situations.
So what you're seeing here is we're investigating, can neurons actually distinguish between different handwritten digits? And we want to see, can the neurons behave in a way that says they recognize that all of the sixes look like sixes, all of the fours look like fours, and so on. Anything with biology can learn to navigate its environment incredibly quickly, incredibly efficiently. And we've had to learn to do that through evolution, otherwise we died.
The promise of far less data and energy consumption is the holy grail for AI advancement. Here's why. Supercomputers like this one can be 1,000,000 times more powerful than the fastest laptop. But both supercomputers and AI run on the same basic technology, silicon chips.
There's never been a focus like there is currently on the chip industry. People have realized that chips are the heart of everything, that this fundamental change to the economy that's being promised in the form of AI depends upon semiconductors, depends upon their rapid development, and depends upon an ever-increasing supply of them.
For over 50 years, we have been creating better chips by packing more and more transistors inside one integrated circuit. The transistors are on-off switches, the physical manifestation of ones and zeros. And we've gotten faster and faster by going smaller and smaller. Over the last 6 decades, we've been trying to double the amount of transistors on an integrated circuit every 2 years. This is the heralded Moore's Law, observed by this guy back in 1975. Today, a phone's processing chip contains billions of transistors, and those transistors are so small, they're just a few nanometers apart in places. But, as our good old Intel co-founder, Gordon Moore, observed, this steady march of progress also has an endpoint.
You're creating a chip, a three-dimensional circuit, by depositing layers of material on a disk of silicon. Some of those layers now are 1 atom thick. Guess what? When you get to 1 atom, you can't go any thinner.
So, we have a problem, and folks all over the world are looking for solutions to our processing limits. After all, our demand for more computing likely isn't slowing down.
It's not like suddenly companies and governments and organizations are going to say, you know what, we don't need more data. Everybody wants to collect more and more data, right? People liken it to the, modern gold rush.
I wonder whether DeepSeek has kind of changed. I mean, it feels like it's upended the race this week.
DeepSeek is such fundamental change to the economics of what's going on.
DeepSeek's January 2025 effect on markets was a strong reminder of these economic incentives. Companies are racing to build more efficient AI models all around the world, at times also fueling existing political tensions.
The president said that he believes that this is a wake-up call to the American AI industry.
One long-standing breakthrough in AI comes from biology and our ability to replicate it. Back to neurons.
The state of data and computing right now is pretty exciting, right? There's a lot going on. A big part of that is trying to learn what we can from how neurons in the real brains and biological brains connect to each other and how they communicate. And then seeing if we can take what we've learned about the biology and then hardwire that into artificial systems, into computational systems. And that's where sort of these ideas of like artificial neural networks and deep learning came from. And the current status of these artificial neural networks and deep learning is pretty fantastic.
But building these AI models and allowing masses of people to use them is costing a lot of energy.
Already there are parts of the world where there literally isn't enough power available via the grid to support these giant data centers.
By 2034, data centers around the world are expected to consume roughly 1,580 terawatt hours yearly. That is about as much as is used by all of India.
To use the words of Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, there's $1 trillion of infrastructure out there that needs to be modernized. The old way of doing things just simply doesn't stack up to the needs of modern computing.
So neurons might help solve some problems, especially around energy. Our our brains are much better and more efficient in similar tasks to AI. For example, a supercomputer must consume up to 40 megawatts of power to function. Our brains run on just 20 watts. That's the difference between a couple of LED light bulbs and thousands of homes. Our brains are also powerful, with about 86 billion neurons that form over 100 trillion connections to each other. And with cells, the distinction between hardware and software isn't quite as well distinct. They're dynamic and intertwined. The cell's actual structure can change and mutate too.
Because of the way that computer chips are organized, they have limited logic functions. They tend to want to do things one thing after another. That's what they're good at. That's what they were designed to do. Human brain doesn't work that way. The human brain is kind of a lattice structure of interconnections where information flows in sort of different ways and different points. So the limitations of bio is that we're just at the very beginning of it.
Dishbrain was our first prototype. We were essentially trying to ask the question, can you interact with a bunch of brain cells in a dish and get them to do anything useful at all?
Brett and his team started by growing a layer of 800,000 neurons on top of a silicon chip. That's about the size of a small bumblebee's brain. And since neurons in our brain naturally communicate using electrical impulses, the researchers could both send and receive impulses between the neurons and a computer hooked up to a silicon chip. To translate the Pong game into something this clump of neurons could sense and control, the chip is divided into 3 sections. There's one larger sensory section, which sends electrical impulses to the neurons to represent aspects of the game, like where the ball is. There's also 2 motor sections. If neurons send impulses in this one, the paddle moves up. If neurons send impulses in the other, the paddle moves down. The chip acts as a communicator between the neurons and the game, but it still doesn't mean that these neurons would want to play the game.
Why would a bunch of cells in a dish actually change their activity in any particular way? There's no Pong-playing gene that exists in brain cells to make them want to play the game Pong.
So the researchers tried to give the neurons incentive. Every time the brain cells missed the ball with the paddle, the researchers stimulated them with chaotic and unpredictable bouts of electricity. On the other hand, when the neurons successfully hit the ball, they received predictable stimuli from the researchers. Within minutes, the neurons started hitting the Pong ball more consistently. Why did it work? One possible explanation is a theory called the free energy principle. It suggests that almost all things in nature, even as small as the dish brain, are constantly trying to perceive and understand their world and minimize surprise.
If you can't predict what's going on in the world, if you can't say, if I reach for a glass of water, I'll successfully pick the water up, it's very hard to survive.
Dishbrain was a proof of concept for this larger idea of biocomputing, also called organic computing, biological hardware, and perhaps most vividly, wetware. Dishbrain made a splash, so big in fact that another team of scientists tried the same experiment using hydrogel, a non-living, soft, flexible substance similar to Jell-O. The hydrogel also learned to play Pong. So the question became, what can neurons do that other substrates can't? How much computing abilities can they provide? And frankly, can they make any money now?
Bloomberg loves earnings.
I know it's like your Super Bowl, right?
I can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
As Bloomberg's global financial correspondent, I get to meet the people shaping the way money flows around the world. And I want to bring you with me.
The capitalist system is the best system in the world. There isn't another one that works as well.
I love all these new Wall Streets. Y'all Street, Wall Street South.
Wall Street used to be a place. Now it's more of an idea. I hope you survived the day.
I did. It was a busy day.
Vevey. It's a small city, it's peaceful. It's quite nice to do fundamental research here.
Meet Fred Jordan. Fred's the CEO and founder of Final Spark, a biotech company nestled in the quaint Swiss town of Vevey. Final Spark is a deep tech startup with a team of just under 10 people. Deep tech startups don't focus on end-user services. Instead, they aim to solve complex problems by harnessing scientific discoveries. Like Cortical Labs, Final Spark is also a biocomputing company.
We have a way to have neurons connect together to create a small ball, and that is called a brain organoid.
Final Spark relies on their own funds of just over $1.5 million. Cortical Labs, in comparison, raised around $10 million in 2023 from folks like In-Q-Tel and Horizon Ventures. Final Spark says they have not accepted outside investment. They've used their own money towards research and development and made 16 brain organoids available for a subscription fee on a cloud computing network called the Neuro Platform.
You can come and you will look at real-time information streamed 24/7 from our neurons here in Switzerland. This picture here shows a close-up version of what's inside the incubator. The important part for us is this activity. Each of these small graphs here represents the voltage for 1 second of one electrode. Now people who are using the Neuro Platform are able to also send some stimulation to some of these electrodes, to which sometimes they will answer.
Researchers from all over the world can log on to the Neuro Platform to observe, study, try different things. Some in the field of robotics, others use the organoids as teaching tools in alternative computing university classes.
Initially, we built this only for us. And then one university came, and then 9, and then 34, and now we have 200 people who want to access remotely to our brain organoids. This is totally new. There is no background at all. So there are more questions than facts about this way of investing. So I think this is the biggest challenge. Investors are always cautious fundamentally about deep tech. And it's even not only deep tech, it's a new deep tech. If you talk about quantum computing, for instance, it's deep tech, but it's an old deep tech. In the future, we'll have to live in a world where there will be some parts in computing which are living and others which are just artificial.
It's all well and good for research purposes, but a future where biology and hardware become one isn't easy. Cells need to be fed, kept at comfortable 37 degrees Celsius, their waste cleaned. After a while, they die.
You have to look at the environmental physics. A computer chip now is drawing multiple hundreds of watts. That throws off so much heat that you have to have these cooling systems in place, and that's a tremendous problem for the computer industry. But imagine trying to bring in biological materials into that environment if you're going to make a hybrid type technology. It's just not possible. You literally are going to start cooking the biological material. Any number of engineering problems exist that will need to be solved if we are to bring in this medium.
All this is hard to scale. Investors who take this leap now aren't looking to turn a quick profit. This is Cortical Labs' first commercial product, the CL1 unit. It's a processor with human brain cells in it. CL1s come with either neurons on a chip, organoids, or a type of neural material Cortical Labs calls bioengineered intelligence. This box acts like a body for the cells, feeding them, disposing of their waste, filtrating and pumping fluid around to keep them alive. The company's success hinges on whether or not they sell their CL1 units. Each one goes for around $35,000, and they're expected to launch in March 2025.
Scaling is always a challenge, just logistically. It's one thing to build a prototype in the lab. It's another to have hundreds of them rolling off a production line and have them be reliable and stable.
I'm not the Pope. I can fail. Perhaps my imagination, my fantasy is not big enough, but I would not invest into these companies from my side.
This is Thomas Hartung. He focuses on toxicology, think poisons, in an effort to improve public health.
Thomas, how much time do you spend in here?
Honestly, I come here when I look for my wife or some of the other people in our team.
He spends a large amount of his time thinking about how we can use biocomputing and these brain organoids now.
Our group was not the first to produce brain organoids. We used to call them mini-brains at the time, but we were the first to standardize this. And we were very proud that when we showed this at one of these big science journalist events, the AAAS, we got on the front page of the Financial Times. I'm a crazy professor. I can't do what I want. I'm trying to replace animal testing.
Animal studies aren't always great at predicting how toxins or poisons affect humans. And although human brain organoids today deliver pretty modest computing tricks, their promise in the field of biomedicine is already remarkable.
The potential for just basic neurobiology is enormous. It could be a very good strategy to accelerate drug development. It is a lengthy process to do an animal experiment, not only a costly one. The value of being 1 day earlier to the market for a pharmaceutical company is about $1 million.
AI should be for everybody, from leaders to the working on floor. And we can save 90% of time, 50% of workforce. AI is core in centers of change. And therefore, we invest heavily to AI. Actually, we started more than 10 years ago because we think the machine in the past helped our hand and legs. Now the machine helps us in brain.
Are you betting all your money in this right now?
When the OpenAI appeared, immediately I asked whole corporations study how will you bring generative AI to their job.
Addiction isn't a choice.
I would isolate, self-medicate, and fabricate to continue my use.
I didn't really think I had a problem.
Rachel and Pete are just 2 of 48.5 million Americans with substance use disorder. But 3 out of 4 people find recovery is possible with help. Go to shatterproof.org/findtreatment to watch the short film No More Secrets and find out how you can get help. That's shatterproof.org/findtreatment.
The circuit is back. How confident are you that AI's promise will outweigh the perils?
I'm not confident.
Tune into Season 3 of The Circuit with me, Emily Chang, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Originals and Bloomberg TV.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
We first started to work with brain organoids probably around 2015, 2016. The aim of the lab is to understand Parkinson's disease, and we were pretty unsatisfied with available animal models as well as more simple cell culture models. The connection between the biocomputing and the disease modeling is actually quite interesting because one of the features or characteristics that we see in neurodegenerative diseases is dementia. So people start to forget things. The concept that we would like to explore is if I can train a brain organoid to learn certain tasks, can it also forget these tasks? And would it forget these tasks quicker or in a different way if it's in a disease context? Like, would an Alzheimer brain organoid forget things quicker than a healthy control organoid?
There are no cures for neurodegenerative diseases, only symptom management. What if we could understand and get rid of the disease itself?
If we can really understand the human brain, then we can potentially treat Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's disease, epilepsy, all kinds of brain-based disease that we really don't have good treatments for now.
many pharma companies have started actually to move away from these kind of diseases because it was just not commercially viable. Now, with these new technologies coming up, I think there's kind of new hopes that we would really develop or be able to develop therapies for these diseases that burden our societies quite a lot.
Studies suggest that at some point in their lives, more than 1/3 of the entire human population will suffer from neurological conditions like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or dementia. By 2050, some project there will be an overall 22% increase in brain disorders, in part fueled by population growth and aging.
The cost for Parkinson in the US alone for a bit more than $50 billion. This is direct and indirect costs, so really like the healthcare, but also what it does to the economy. At the moment, there's about 10 million Parkinson patients in the world. Yearly in the US, there's about 90,000 people being diagnosed with PD. And since worldwide populations are aging, the likelihood to suffer from PD is increasing.
The idea of using biological medium to either process or store information makes sense in a lot of ways, but there are those who are saying, actually, this is living tissue. Not only how can we actually do this, but should we be doing this?
I think the biggest elephant in the room is, would a brain organoid become self-aware?
I'm not worried at all at the moment with these tiny, tiny little balls of cells that they would suddenly develop something which I could consider consciousness. There's a lot of ethical issues in all biomedical research, and this starts if you're using stem cells, as we do. You have to imagine the donors of these cells are often still alive. Is your signature still valid because you couldn't imagine that somebody would produce a brain which is thinking? These are all interesting questions, yeah? And they really get hot if we assume at some point in the future these brain organoids could suffer. They could experience pain. They could suffer from what they learn. So imagine this, yeah? Is this still acceptable? If they are self-conscient, even in a very simple sense, can I stop feeding them? Can I kill them? How much complexity you need to really call something intelligent?
A lot of things start and take years in the lab before they become commercially viable. I think we'll get there one day. It's just too early.
One way to look at this is that it's taken the semiconductor industry more than 50 years to get to this point where they can supply the world of electronics. 50 years is quite a long time. They say they've been going at breakneck pace. The amount of money, the amount of effort, the amount of study, the amount of science that has gone into that will take a long time to replicate with another medium.
Whatever the future may bring, one thing is already clear, that brain cells will always deliver more than the sum of their parts. And that's neither boring nor binary.
Asia is a continent of contrast. The region is a nexus of rich cultural traditions and a vibrant hub of trailblazing innovation and modernity. How will it push the limits of technology even further?
Going to space should become as easy as, taking a flight.
If NASA is designing a lander, their approach is they're designing a Formula One car. So we take, say, a Jeep approach.
Minso, give us a sense of how you translate Korean architecture for the rest of the world.
We call this madang. In general terms, it's where we can be ourselves, where we belong.
There is an old saying in Korea that says, "거미 불루, 화이 불치." It means simple but not humble. So it has a tremendous impact on Korean architecture.
People tend to think the robot AI taking the job from them. We want to use the robot as a basic asset, meaning people have an income through the robot.
From space tech in India to robotics in Japan, Asia is driving the future, reshaping industries, societies, and the way we live. Join me as I take you through the bold innovations. Discover Asia's next-gen technologies on Momentum.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Crypto.
How do you expect the asset to continue price increase at these levels that we've seen? And at what point do we see, winter coming again?
Winter's not coming back. We're past that phase. If Bitcoin's not going to zero, it's going to $1 million. And you have all the evidence you need to determine that, right? The President of the United States has determined he supports Bitcoin. The cabinet supports Bitcoin. Scott Bessent supports Bitcoin. Paul Atkins has shown himself to be an enthusiastic believer of Bitcoin and digital assets. Ken Taz at CFTC feels the same way. The banks are going to custody Bitcoin. Bitcoin has gotten through its riskiest period. The accounting has been corrected. There's now only 450 Bitcoin a day available for sale by natural sellers.
Don't miss Bloomberg Crypto live Tuesday.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, Mondays on Bloomberg.
I'm David Weston. Join me for the next generation of Wall Street Week. This week, Vlad Tenev of Robinhood takes us into the wild world of mathematical superintelligence. We go to Saudi Arabia for the story of Aramco's plan to help wean the kingdom off of oil.
We think of ourselves as a technology company delivering energy. We are very pragmatic here in the kingdom.
And Larry Summers dissects the Fed's latest decision. Watch the all-new Wall Street Week. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute economic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in Cape Town, South Africa, and this is Bloomberg.
The deepest hole ever dug on planet Earth is right here, in northwest Russia. It's called the Kola borehole. Scientists started drilling in 1970 to study the composition of the Earth's crust, and presumably to see how deep they could go. Eventually, they reached a depth of almost 12 kilometers. That's roughly a third of the way through the Earth's crust on land.
It took them over 20 years to drill, just because of the hard rock and that depth. As they were drilling, there was this rumors that they were hearing voices down there, almost like the depths of hell. It's a little bit, it's crazy.
In the mid-90s, the project ran out of funding. The site was abandoned, and the hole was sealed up. And the 12-kilometer record still stands. For now.
12 kilometers is not that far, right? And just think about that. We've actually never directly measured anything deeper than that. It truly is kind of the final frontier.
Well, okay, it's not like we have no idea what's down there. Coal, oil, and natural gas covers 80% of global energy demand after all. But there's one resource under the Earth that's often overlooked and maybe undervalued.
Drill anywhere on the Earth, and if you go deep enough, you'll find hot rocks. And so what you can do is turn that heat into power, electricity. And that's really geothermal energy.
Geothermal is the underdog of the energy industry, generating just 0.3% of electricity worldwide. It's mostly considered impractical outside of a few specific spots around the globe. But that's starting to change.
Geothermal energy opens up a new economic paradigm. Heat suddenly becomes a service and not linked to a commoditized fuel.
Hundreds of millions of dollars are pouring into startups aiming to tap the energy under our feet.
Geothermal is just too compelling to ignore. I like to say it's the largest source of clean energy on Earth.
And today, companies are looking to go deeper than we've ever gone before, using new drilling technologies that do this to solid rock. But are there new technologies really up to the task? And can they avoid the earth-shaking consequences when drilling goes deeply wrong?
Yeah.
Okay.
That fellow in the bucket hat is Jim Folds. With his crew of geology students, he's constantly on the hunt for new hotspots, collecting data that geothermal companies can use to expand their operations.
Like butter, baby.
They use methods like this heat probe to check subsurface temperatures to find the best spots to drill.
Geothermal energy, in a way, it's so simple. It's just the Earth's heat. It's always there. At least it will be there for another couple billion years. The core is much, much hotter than the surface of the Earth, and there's sort of large convection cells that help to bring that heat up closer to the surface from deeper levels. The Earth produces enough geothermal heat in a given year, I think something like 10 times the amount of energy that just the United States needs in a given year. There are many areas on Earth that have relatively high levels of geothermal potential.
Countries like New Zealand, Indonesia, Turkey, and China all have plentiful geothermal resources. But Iceland is considered the true geothermal champ. The country transformed its volcanic heat into an economic windfall.
Iceland was a developing country in the early 20th century until it tapped geothermal energy. And once it did, it was able to use that energy and convert it into industrial output and become a richer country. It is today one of the most developed countries in the world with a very high per capita income. But there are many countries around the world that have access to geothermal power but have yet to really tap it. For places like Kenya, they're at an early stage of development. But if they can access more geothermal power, they can have cheap, clean electricity that can be converted into economic output pretty quickly.
Sorry guys, it's a bit noisy because there are machines running, generator running, cooling system happening. So this point, steam is collected and sent to Sosian power plant. So from this point, you can see a green line supplied to all of the units in the power plant.
This plant is operated by Sosian Energy, a relatively new player that raised $91 million to build the 35-megawatt facility. It taps into a hotbed of geothermal potential known as the Rift Valley.
This portion of the African continental shelf is actually separating from the rest of the continental shelf. The area where we are today, we're at the bottom of that rift, and that is why it's called the Rift Valley. And because of this, the internal Earth heat that we're using, that heat is much more readily accessible because the distance that we have to travel to tap into this heat is much lower than other areas in the world.
That lucky geography means that almost half of Kenya's electricity is generated from geothermal heat.
This plant generates electricity through what I call elaborate plumbing. These massive green pipes is what is delivering the steam from 2 to 3 kilometers deep. It is directed into turbines, and those turbines convert the heat into electrical energy. That electricity is then transferred to the national grid. This country has a potential of up to 10 gigawatts of geothermal resource. And right now, we've barely tapped 1 gigawatt. So we have a massive headroom that we need to exploit as a country. We can more than meet our national demand through just tapping into the geothermal resource. Industrialization does not happen on thin air. It requires electricity. And electricity needs to come from sustainable sources. And geothermal can be very central to that African industrialization story because it is something that is available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
And that always-on quality is very, very special in the world of clean energy.
Solar and wind are the two variable sources of renewable energy that have exploded with hundreds of billions of investment in recent years around the world, but they're at the whim of the weather. That means that when it's cloudy, solar panels don't generate optimally, and when air currents are still, turbines for wind power are also not in operation. And geothermal, because it's available 24 hours, 7 days a week, provides that reliability that investors are looking for in a grid.
So on the surface, geothermal looks like an ideal energy source. Clean, dependable, good for another few billion years. But so far, it's only really worked in a few places. So why exactly is that? Well, it turns out that geothermal power needs 3 very specific conditions: heat, a reservoir of water, and a layer of porous rock. If you've got all 3, you're in business. No water? No big deal. Many geothermal plants simply pour their own fluid down into the hot rock. But that rock really has to be porous. If you can't get fluid flowing through the hot rock, you can't use the heat. Solid rock just won't work. So outside of the places where the rocks are hot and full of holes, geothermal is a non-starter. And that's why it only generates 0.3% of electricity worldwide, putting it in the other wedge, the least cool wedge in the whole chart. But a new class of startup is aiming to make the wedge a whole lot bigger.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jumana Bersachi in Doha, Qatar, and this is Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Open Interest, this data from Trump's trade war, what are you seeing in your district?
Businesses are afraid to accelerate. By and large, they're pulling over and putting on the hazards.
You're constantly speaking to businesses. Is anyone making big investments?
Inflation is a big bugaboo. There's no evidence yet that inflation-driven drop in sentiment drops spending. That's why I say there's the disconnect on the consumer side.
Don't miss Open Interest live weekdays.
Fervo Energy is a next-generation geothermal developer. We've developed new technology that makes geothermal work in far more places.
To do that, Tim is borrowing technology from the oil and gas industry, where he used to work.
I didn't plan this, but the office building you can see right behind me was where I started my career, just through the window there at BHP's Houston offices, and started my career working as a drilling engineer in South Texas. So they just started getting into the shale boom. The light bulb went off for me that all the technological advancements that I was seeing in my day-to-day career in oil and gas were going to be just as transformative for geothermal drilling as they were for oil and gas drilling.
Hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, is a process of injecting highly pressurized liquid into underground rock, opening up gaps where none existed before, to then extract oil and gas. Combine fracking with geothermal instead, and you've got enhanced geothermal.
We create new fractures in the rock that essentially turns the subsurface into a giant heat exchanger, or radiator, and we pump cold water down the injection wells, flow over to our production wells where they come back up to the surface, picking up the heat, and then we capture that heat at the surface and use it to generate electricity.
Now, you've gone from 3 conditions to just 1, hot rocks, and that could open things up a lot.
Historically, geothermal was limited to very specific geologies. So the only places that you would see a geothermal power plant today would be in this certain hotspot in Northern California or some plants across northern Nevada. What this map is showing is that thanks to the developments of enhanced geothermal system technology, much more of the country is developable. So even at today's cost structure, you can think about things that are in the reddish and orangish color and some of the yellow color as already being cost effective. So we're envisioning 100-fold increase in the amount of geothermal. And you can hardly any country.
Nevada. They're now building in the mountains of Utah.
All 400 megawatts will be online in 2020. Megawatt project is quite large. When we bring this plant on, we'll be responsible for roughly 10% of all the power generated in the state of Utah.
Producing that much clean electricity is a big opportunity, and others are taking notice. An hour south, in a region dense with fracked gas wells, another enhanced geothermal startup, Sage Geosystems, is building a test plant.
So, yeah, I spent 36 years in the oil and gas industry. It was all with Shell. I really wanted to be in the energy transition, and geothermal is that clean energy that best leverages my skill set.
One of the most exciting parts about geothermal energy is that it provides the opening for a just transition for people who work in the fossil fuel industry. A lot of people who are currently engaged in geothermal energy come from oil drilling, and it requires the same skill set of geophysicists and roughnecks who are willing to do hard labor of drilling and have a knowledge of the Earth's crust and how to bore beneath it.
Was 50% HCl correct? I don't know. You're supposed to just say, yeah, of course it was.
Sure, definitely.
At 537 barrels.
17.1%.
My daughter definitely had an impact on me moving into geothermal. She worked for Sage before I worked for Sage. She likes to remind me of that.
I was like, yeah, you should come over because it's way funnier over here. You know, oil and gas is kind of boring and you know what you're doing, but over here we're starting a whole new company. We're starting a revolution.
Is it awkward working together at all?
Yes, yes. I think it is.
Sage started out in 2020 with an enhanced geothermal approach similar to Fervo's. But they soon realized they could put their fracked wells to a different purpose. The space opened up underground can also work as a kind of battery.
In a simple term, we drill a well just like any oil and gas well, and we target a hard, non-permeable rock that we fracture using the same oil field technology, and it works like a balloon. We pump water in, it kind of airs up, and when we want to produce electricity, we flow it back. The pressure from the earth brings it back through our lines, turns a Pelton turbine, which in turn rotates a generator and makes electricity.
Storing energy like this could open a new line of business for geothermal companies by pairing with solar and wind.
In California and Texas, actually solar is out producing demand in the middle of the day. So you can take that precious clean energy, use it to store water under pressure, and then again produce that water at a time of day when the demand is higher and the people really need the energy.
Sage and Fervo say they've raised money from a mix of venture capital, government grants, and partners like drilling companies that stand to benefit from the growth of geothermal. All of this support has raised high hopes for the industry. The International Energy Agency predicts that by 2050, total geothermal power capacity could grow from 15 gigawatts to more than 800 gigawatts, meaning up to 15% of global electricity demand.
We're in probably the most dramatic growth curve ever experienced in the industry. Everybody who's working in the industry feels that we're part of a new revolution.
But before any of that can happen, geothermal has to overcome some challenges. For one thing, just getting into the game costs a pretty penny.
One of the issues with geothermal energy is that it requires high upfront costs, upwards of $90 million for a single borehole, compared to $1 million or less for a single gas generator. What that means in effect is that people who are doing the drilling need to change the economics by finding either states or municipalities that are willing to enter into a long-term agreement. It's being able to project 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future and have a reliable return on your investment. And the problem right now is that investors don't have confidence about the stability of power prices that far in the future.
For Sage and Fervo, even getting their early projects off the ground has been a pricey proposition, and they'll need to keep attracting humongous piles of capital as they expand their operations over the coming years. And there's another problem that could pose an even bigger risk to the growth of the industry. All right, let's cut right to it. This is Bloomberg's new show, Primer. Technology is a $1 trillion game. Won, lost, won again, just by backing the right science at precisely the right moment.
My life has been focused on how can you elicit intelligence from brain cells in a dish.
This is the fundamental building block of our fusion technology.
We're doing things that have never been done by anybody, ever.
Everyone is selling the future. If you want to understand what's coming, you'll want to watch Primer, because details matter.
Lasers on?
So do lasers.
There we go.
it's on all these lovely channels. Hope you're jotting this down.
Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders. CFO Pascal Desroches has played a key role in restructuring AT&T, reducing debt and refocusing the business. Now his steady approach has the company primed for growth.
I'm a believer you try to make progress on big problems every day, and ultimately you'll look back and say, hey, you've come a long way.
Watch Chief Future Officer Wednesday on Bloomberg. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
All sources of power have trade-offs. And the trade-off with geothermal is that sometimes, in the process of drilling, it can cause earthquakes. There was an incident in South Korea in 2017 when geothermal drilling led to an earthquake of the magnitude 5.5, which is one of the largest earthquakes that have hit South Korea.
한동대학교에서 안에 있는 그 한동 글로벌 학교의 고등학교 3학년으로 갑자기 막 땅이 흔들리고 초등학생들이 흔들려 보이는 거예요. 그러면서 막 어디선가 진짜 생전 처음 들어보는
Like Sage and Fervo, the Pohang project used fracking techniques. That, plus a drilling site that was too close to a fault line, led to disaster.
지각과 지각 간의 어떤 힘이 부딪히는 응력이 폭발하면서 땅 속에 지진이라 할 수 있는 그 어떤 산사태라 할 수 있는 지진이 발생하는 원리입니다. 포항은
이제 그냥 조금이라도 그 지진이 일어났을 때 그 비슷한 소리만 나도 갑자기 이제 안 움직이고 그 밖에 나오려고 하는 것 같아요. 저도 이제
자식을 놓고 또 안전하게 살 수 있는가 어떤 그런 어떤 혼란스러움이었습니다. 그리고 외부에 포항 지진은 이제 위험한 지진의 도시다. 저 같은 경우에는 직접 그것을 경험하기도 했습니다.
As bad as the Pohang earthquake was, events like it are extremely rare. As far as we know, Pohang is by far the worst geothermal-triggered quake to date. But even a handful of accidents can deeply damage the reputation of an energy source. And natural gas fracking is already controversial for instances of groundwater pollution and even earthquakes.
We actually have monitoring stations at this facility and at our test well in Starr County. So for all of our projects, we will be monitoring for induced seismicity or earthquakes.
We're quite pleased now that over the course of 40 years of field development, we've never had any issues related to seismicity. So it's something that we take quite seriously.
As this industry scales, it is one thing that it'll have to be very careful about, getting permission from all the people who will be around that geothermal power plant and what kind of risks they will be facing as a result of having this in their backyard.
Despite the risks, geothermal's potential to become a dominant clean energy source keeps attracting prospectors. In fact, some companies want to not only keep digging, but dig even deeper.
There's companies out there that are starting to use what we already have in oil and gas to unlock geothermal. I always nudge people and say, look, there's much more. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Carlos Araque, CEO of Quaise Energy, wants to drill as deep as necessary to tap geothermal heat literally anywhere on Earth.
Geothermal can truly repower the world, but we have to play the hotter and deeper game.
Enhanced geothermal only works down to around 3 or 4 kilometers. Going much deeper could open up far more drilling sites around the world and generate more power from hotter temperatures.
20 kilometers indeed opens up the whole world to geothermal, so twice as deep as an airplane flies high. If you can get to 20 kilometers, every part of the world has the geothermal potential of Iceland.
Of course, there's a reason no one's done this before.
At these depths that we're talking about, the type of rock that you encounter is what we call the basement rock. It's like these igneous rock that are like granite and basalt. So these are the type of really hard rock that for oil and gas with their conventional drill bit is very difficult to drill into. And so we're not trying to use conventional drill bits, we're actually trying to use microwave, or in this case millimeter wave, to cause the rock to vibrate, and it actually starts to then heat up to the point where it's melting and then ultimately vaporizing. So what we have here on display is a basalt paver that's 2 inches thick. We should be able to make about a 4-inch hole in about 90 seconds.
Using this terrifying beam of death, Quasar's engineers claim they might be able to drill down 10 kilometers in a few months. The Kola borehole, by contrast, took decades.
It's really, really hot.
But Quasar's approach is truly new and untested. While the company has been able to raise about $90 million of capital so far, some geologists are skeptical that geothermal power will ever be practical in the depths Quasar is aiming for.
Is it possible that it won't work? It's always the case. And also, it's also possible that things can get damaged in the field, just bad luck.
We're doing things that have never been done by anybody, ever. So there's always the possibility that we hit a hiccup, we hit a small brick wall, we fall flat on our faces.
It's for us to really tell the world that it does or does not work. I mean, it's really on us. So that's why I feel it's actually really interesting, a great job, because it's the unknown at this point.
It's too early to tell if these stabs into the unknown will really be transformative for the geothermal industry. But if the industry scales, it could be transformative for the business of energy.
Once you bore a hole from which geothermal heat is taken, you're not tied to the constant supply of gas or coal. That's dramatically different than our current economic model of generating heat.
And in the long run, it seems almost inevitable that we're going to harness geothermal on a bigger scale. We live on a literal ball of energy, and someone is always going to want to dig a deeper hole to get to it.
We'll have to see over the next 3, 6, 9 months how the tariff discussions play out and what does it mean.
I do factor in some effects of tariffs now on inflation, on prices.
I like the idea of the 10% tariff across the board.
I've spent my entire career focused on fiscal discipline. I don't think these people have the foggiest notion what they're doing. And I think DOGE is doing tremendous damage to government.
Elon Musk is probably the inventor of our age, but who understands
that we're in the midst of the most profound convergence among technologies.
When we are facing a once-in-a-generation technological disruption,
we cannot close this retirement gap without private-public partnership. We have to have good policy.
Do you think, Dawn, that the market is correct to be, as of now, pricing in 3 rate cuts in 2025?
I would take the other side of that bet.
I'm Alex Rodriguez. And I'm Jason Kelly. And we're back with more episodes of our show, The Deal.
The theme of this season, On the Road. We're bringing you more behind-the-scenes conversations with the biggest names in sports, business, and culture, like Melody Hobson.
I started to study women's sports like an 11-year-old studies baseball statistics, and I got dangerous in seeing up arrows.
Susie Wolf.
When you're competing, you're not thinking about any fear or any worries of what could happen.
Josh Harris.
You can't do a good deal with a bad person.
Jay Batt.
At the end of the day, there's never been a better time to be a student athlete.
And more. Stay tuned.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Surveillance.
They say you're in your right if you use Section 122. Why didn't you guys do that from the beginning?
Well, Section 122 only gives you 150 days.
In Section 122, if you use this
that,
now for 150 days, would it be a bridge to 301 or a bridge to 232? What are you thinking more long term?
You can be the strategist on that.
So just got to tell you one thing. You're not allowed to hire Anne-Marie. She's with us, all right? Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance live every weekday.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Amber Verdern at the G7 in Alberta, Canada. This is Bloomberg.
People of a different sort altogether in the Philippines, a volcano erupted in
1991, a volcano in the Philippines called Mount Pinatubo erupted. The eruption was devastating, spewing ash and 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the air. But in its aftermath, scientists observed something else. For a little while, all that sulfur dioxide in the air partially blocked the sun and caused the entire planet's temperature to temporarily drop by 0.5 degrees Celsius. Now, an American startup wants to imitate that cooling effect to fight the effects of our warming planet.
I couldn't figure out why scientists hadn't done this.
The idea that we might engineer what might be called the good part of the volcano has taken off and increasingly has found capital willing to fund it.
It's a crazy and controversial idea that's recently been attracting billionaire philanthropists.
For these guys in Silicon Valley, it's really appealing because it's very like superhero and it's reliant on this idea that we can use technology to like create a better world.
Other groups are looking for what they say are safer, more sustainable cooling methods, like modifying the ocean using whale poo. But testing and proving all these technologies is difficult.
It's gonna hit.
And expensive.
We've still got some testing and tweaking to do with the biopod.
And as temperatures rise, time is running out.
The science writer Eli Kintich, he had a very clever bumper sticker for this whole conversation, and that was geoengineering, a terrible idea whose time has come.
And even if the science does work, is geoengineering just an excuse for continuing our dirty emissions?
At a certain point, you do have to figure out how much risk you're willing to bear and what the penalties are for you if you choose wrongly.
Currently, we're inflating the balloon with sulfur dioxide, SO2.
Which is one of the substances emitted by volcanoes, and this serves as our sunscreen for Earth. It reflects a little bit of sunlight from the stratosphere for 2 years before falling back to Earth.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Launching. 3, 2, 1. Yes.
Nice.
This is Luke Eisman and Andrew Song of Make Sunsets. The serial entrepreneurs are using a fairly basic and decidedly unorthodox technique to cool the planet. It sits in a category of ideas known as geoengineering.
So geoengineering is the application of some technology or method globally in order to address the symptoms of climate change. There's solar radiation management, which is a fancy way of saying blocking sunlight from coming into the Earth.
The basic idea is this. A special aircraft, or balloon in this case, flies into the stratosphere, so way higher than a regular commercial jet. The aircraft releases sulfur dioxide. The balloon just pops from the low air pressure. The SO2 reflects a small portion of solar radiation back into space, which then cools the planet, in theory. And then the amount of SO2 released determines how much the planet is cooled. So it's similar to a volcano, but theoretically with less of a threat to human lives and property. We just don't know.
The other form is called carbon geoengineering that can draw carbon dioxide either directly out of the air or in some cases capture it.
CO2 is captured from the air or directly from sources like power plants. It's then turned into liquid by adding water and then injected deep underground where it reacts with rocks to form stable carbonate minerals. Kind of like sweeping it under the rug, except for thousands and thousands of years. But the process is wildly energy intensive, since it takes a lot of air to capture any significant amount of CO2. It also requires large upfront investments, with some of the world's first carbon capture plants costing millions of dollars.
With direct air capture, you can literally measure the carbon that you're pulling out of the atmosphere, and that makes it really attractive to investors because you know exactly what you've removed. You can't necessarily say that for if you plant a tree.
That fact has made direct carbon capture the gold standard of geoengineering methods. But some scientists say this isn't a question of either or. We may soon need both.
The international goal set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement was to halt global warming at 1.5 degrees. So it's extremely unlikely we're going to make that.
I describe solar radiation management as a painkiller. It only really targets the symptom of climate change, the heat. It is the one thing that we know would turn the thermostat down on planet Earth.
Sounds like a huge business opportunity, except for a not-so-tiny, not-so-insignificant problem. Scientists don't understand the chemistry of sulfur in the upper atmosphere.
We don't know how much a dose cools the planet. We don't know if continued geoengineering will wreck weather patterns like monsoons or destroy opportunities for agriculture in different parts of the world who may not have had a say in whether we're going to do it or not.
There have been no large-scale experiments so far on solar radiation management. Scientists are confident that solar radiation management would cool the planet. But then, after that, the scientific community are pretty divided. In 2022, there was an open letter published calling for non-use agreement, and this has now been signed by 550-plus academics. But also in 2023, another open letter was published calling for essential research into this solar radiation management.
I politely disagree with scientists who think we need to have a 99.999% understanding of the exact amount of cooling, because we don't have that for the warming created by CO2. We can't let precision be the enemy of action.
And Make Sunsets is acting one balloon at a time for now. In California, we join them as they launch their sulfur-filled balloons.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Although they haven't quite worked out all of the kinks.
We are not buoyant enough. but let's see.
Oof. Come on. It's gonna hit.
And when you apply the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things, sometimes things break.
Please stop filming.
Or get stuck on those important-looking wires.
Dude, I don't think it's gonna pop, man. It's pretty thick.
It's a BB gun. It would definitely pop it.
But with the help of a metal pole and a ladder, the work continues.
There you go. Oh, God. Oh, yeah, baby. Nice job.
According to Make Sunset's website, they've already launched over 130 balloons. They say that that's the equivalent of planting more than 4 million trees, but there's currently no verification process to prove this equivalence.
This is the only technology that will materially cool the planet during our lifetime. To not pursue that as startups, as governments, as individuals is frankly irresponsible in my opinion.
That claim is shared by some climate activists and venture capitalists, including Tim Draper of Draper Associates and his son Adam of Boost VC, who have both backed Make Sunsets.
They kind of have the same attitude as the co-founders. What are we all waiting for? Like, this is a solution. We can do this now. Why aren't we doing it? I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And, you know, Tim and Adam have signed on with that. And that's sort of why they're funding him.
We had $500,000 lined up before we even had any customers. So that gave us the runway to even experiment with this.
So far, they say they've raised $1 million from Draper Associates, Pioneer Fund, and Boost VC. Other billionaires have been investing in the research of solar radiation management for years. Bill Gates, Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskowitz, and OpenAI's Sam Altman have all either directly contributed or voiced support for the technology.
I think just last year, $75 million has been announced in funding for more research into solar radiation management. But as a whole, the direct air capture market is much more established. So between 2018 and 2022, there was about $3 billion spent on upscaling and developing carbon removal as a whole, and about 46% of that went to direct air capture.
Most of the attention and most of the money is on sucking carbon out of the air, but that's a really expensive and complicated project, and it would take a lot of that being done to make a huge dent in our overall carbon budget. On the other hand, solar radiation management is a lot cheaper. So $1 billion in solar geoengineering and $1 billion in carbon sequestration is a completely different thing. So we're talking about this very expensive, very complicated thing, and this relatively very cheap and relatively simple thing, which would be blocking the sun.
Currently, if you want to remove a ton of CO2 from the atmosphere, it can cost anywhere from $500 to $700 per ton. We charge $1.
That sounds like a simple sales pitch, but the devil is in the details.
Say you're doing stratospheric aerosol injection. To have an impact on the climate as a whole, this would have to be done globally, 24/7, forever.
Basically, a fleet of planes would need to continually release sulfur to keep our temperatures down. And if we suddenly stop,
that should mean a huge rise in temperatures without enough time to adapt or mitigate the impacts.
This is called termination shock.
I don't think that this can be a commercial venture. Because of the risk of termination shock, that company would have to exist forever. They would need to be doing this around the clock in international airspace. And so you need all countries to be on board with this plan.
And the politics around geoengineering are tricky. When Make Sunsets released its balloons in Mexico, the country banned geoengineering experiments altogether.
A country, if it decides to deploy solar radiation management on its own, you know, it could impact the weather of its next door neighbors, and that could be seen as an act of war. These questions need to be answered on a kind of global consensus, and frankly, we haven't seen that level of international cooperation yet.
Whether startups like Make Sunsets can have an impact on our climate is questionable. But one thing's certain, they've kickstarted a debate about the need to employ more drastic measures in the battle against climate change. And with it, they may have opened the door for other startups in the geoengineering space to enter through.
I think it's more dangerous to do nothing, and I think that in general, people should take actions to try to solve problems that are important to them.
The only thing that's preventing us from scaling right now is demand, really. And that demand, I believe, will increase as the world heats up. That's a sad part of this entire thing. Mother Nature is actually our best marketing person. As the world heats up, as there's more catastrophic climate events, as there's more hurricanes, people will start to say, why is it getting so hot and why isn't anyone doing anything about this?
Bloomberg loves earnings.
I know it's like your Super Bowl, right?
I can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
People ask me all the time, what is the key to being a really good investor? And I tell them it's to surround yourself with and work with the best investors you can find. On Bloomberg Wealth, I'm going to take you to meet the greatest investors in the world, the people that I would like to have managing my money.
It's 100 years, 80 years, 100 years of dollar strength, so much so that important commodities, gold, oil, are denominated in dollars. I think undoing that will take a long, long time.
Another geoengineering mission underway to reverse climate change is by Edwina Tanner and her team at Waitlist. Today, they're getting ready for a day of collecting data in the Coral Sea. Their aim is to suck up carbon from the atmosphere with the help of these guys.
Whales are the original climate engineers. They come up to the surface waters and they evacuate large fecal plumes of really rich nutrients.
These plumes of poo are quite important.
These nutrients are really important to feeding the bottom of the food chain and the marine environment.
The nutrients found in the plumes feed phytoplankton, kickstarting an increase known as phytoplankton bloom. The phytoplankton naturally capture CO2 via photosynthesis and convert the CO2 into organic compounds. After the phytoplankton die, they sink to the deep ocean, carrying carbon with it. The whole process is considered a biological carbon pump and transfers about 10 gigatons of carbon from the atmosphere to the deep ocean each year. To simulate their own carbon pump, Waitlist invented a substance called aquafood, which is artificial whale poo. The aquafood would be tailored to local climates and released in multiple locations, thus exponentially increasing the amount of carbon removed from the atmosphere. This is a type of marine geoengineering or ocean fertilization. Once the aquafood has been perfected, the Waitlist team hopes to spread it across existing shipping routes.
We're also looking at just adapting ships that are already crisscrossing the ocean and giving them modular plants for ocean nourishment, which could all happen in the right ocean location. And this way we could do light touches of ocean nourishment, but all around the world off different ships. I think shipping itself needs to decarbonize, so this could be part of the solution for the whole shipping industry.
There are desert areas of the ocean. By adding nutrients to these desert areas, we can make phytoplankton grow in large quantities.
It has a bunch of eggs in it.
Oh, yeah? Oh, gosh, it's amazing. Phytoplankton are tiny, you can't even see them, but they are the climate giants and they are the things that are actually going to save us. They provide 50% of the oxygen that we breathe on the Earth. And from our experiments, by putting in 200 litres of nutrients, which is about a 1 whale poo, we can actually sequester about a tonne of carbon.
But phytoplankton, some of which are algae, can grow too much, producing toxic algae blooms. You typically see this in stagnant or slow-moving rivers or lakes or on the coastlines.
But this does not happen in the open ocean. With a whale fecal plume, the nutrients are able to be used by phytoplankton productively instead of destructively.
This, proving their work is productive and not destructive, is the challenge. Studies on ocean fertilization aren't yet conclusive. And safely testing the science without harming sensitive ecosystems takes money, time, and expertise. For billionaires or anxious VCs looking for quick results, it's not ideal.
Billionaire philanthropists are really focused on impact, and they're looking for data and ways that they can measure that their dollars are making an impact on whatever issue they're interested in, from public health or education, everything.
To actually do the science we're doing literally costs the amount of a blockbuster movie.
Today is a big day for the WhaleX team as they prepare to embark on a 4-day research trip. It's taken them a year to build their own biopod, which allows them to test the effects of their aquafood on a controlled area of the ocean. The biopod pumps air and nutrients into the water, growing phytoplankton.
The nutrient is essentially feeding the phytoplankton, which are in the seawater.
Why is it sinking at this end and slide at that end?
But the biopod's first trip into the wild doesn't go as expected. It keeps sinking.
Some of the aeration chambers didn't fire because of too much pressure, so we'll need a bigger pump to make that work. So yes, not exactly to plan, as a lot of experiments are, but we are going to get some pretty good data that will inform our next trial.
The experiment is scrapped and will need to be repeated, and that takes, you guessed it, money.
I was told point blank by a very prominent head of a venture capital fund that if I talk to a company who has a brilliant idea but a meh business plan, and then I talk to a company that has maybe not such a good idea but a very good business plan that's going to make money, I'm going to fund company B every time. And I really find this is a bit of a juxtaposition, because what we need to fund is these really good ideas that are great for the planet, but perhaps are not so great for your wallet.
AI should be for everybody, from leaders to the working on floor. And we can save 90% of time, 50% of workforce. AI is core in centers of change. And therefore, we invest heavily to AI. Actually, we started more than 10 years ago because we think the machine in the past helped our hand and legs. Now the machine helps us in brain.
Are you betting all your money in this right now?
When the OpenAI appeared, immediately I asked whole corporations study how will you bring generative AI to their job.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
What trade does is it meets a consumer demand. Consumer demand is not weakening. China supplies a little over 30% of what we eat, wear, and consume. That's unlikely to change anytime soon. I think that supply will find new homes potentially, but our reliance as a global economy on Chinese manufacturing is unlikely to change fundamentally anytime soon.
Don't miss the opening trade live every weekday.
Didn't really think I had a problem.
I would isolate, self-medicate.
Like 48.5 million Americans, they didn't choose addiction. Go to shatterproof.org/findstreatment. Watch the film No More Secrets and find out how you can get help. That's shatterproof.org/findtreatment.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Despite being an early mover, WhaleX's growth has been stunted by a lack of funding. Right now, WhaleX says its main support comes from Professor Wien and other private donations. In 2025, they hope to complete a crowdfunding campaign and strike deals with industry partners.
It's almost like what you need to do to write a successful science paper is sort of the opposite of what you need to do to sell a business model. you have all of these forces that encourage you to attract attention and be flashy and speak with utter confidence. In science, there's no such thing as 0% or 100% confidence.
In the meantime, the only other way to raise funds is to offer carbon credits.
Once you can prove and verify your carbon sequestration, then you can actually sell off your credits to a company. We're not quite there yet, but this is the aim that in the future this will happen.
So, step one for all these startups is figuring out how much carbon you've removed from the atmosphere, which, when you're dealing with a sample size the size of the ocean, is challenging enough. Then you need to apply a dollar amount to that carbon. And since the carbon offsets market is what you might call loosely regulated,
It's been very confusing, very wild, wild west.
that dollar amount is flexible. And while there is an existing framework to rely on for the calculation of carbon removal credits, there's no such thing for solar radiation management. Make Sunsets, for example, sell something it's called cooling credits.
We sell cooling credits, where 1 gram of SO2 in the stratosphere offsets the warming effect of 1 ton of CO2 for a year. That would literally cost $16 per year for you to offset your carbon footprint for 1 year.
Mate Sunset's cooling credits are really quite murky in how they're calculated.
It'll be verified via existing satellite infrastructure that can already detect volcanic eruptions, and it's just infrared cameras. And so at scale, you don't have to trust us anymore. There's satellites that currently detect volcanic eruptions that can also detect our deployments at scale.
From an investor point of view, something like ocean fertilization, although it's very novel, the science is not quite there yet, there is a path to market through the EU carbon dioxide removal framework. There is a lot of rigorous work going into making sure that these credits do what they say they do. That is not the case for solar radiation management.
For now, the marriage between experimental geoengineering and the private sector is an imperfect union. But as the need for climate solutions grows, so too will the interest in unconventional methods.
We have to be able to crawl before we can walk, and then before we can run. The best analogy I can give is, Jeff Bezos, Google, they started in a garage. This is the garage you're looking at right now.
There is very little doubt that the pressures that are causing people to investigate geoengineering as a mature, rational option, that's just going to keep on keeping on. Every year, every decade that the world warms, we're going to need solutions that may seem increasingly less desperate.
And with all of these geoengineering concepts, there is an elephant with a colossal carbon footprint stomping around the room: human emissions.
It's not a solution to the problem. Climate change is caused by industrial greenhouse gas emissions going up into the atmosphere and warming the planet. And geoengineering isn't gonna reverse that basic fact. At a certain point, you do have to figure out how much risk you're willing to bear and what the penalties are for you if you choose wrongly.
There is a nice confluence between the long-term investor and what we're trying to do. We have an operating principle that's in our handbook: take the long view. When we went public, we put a timeline up on the screen for the whole company in an all-hands meeting. And that timeline went from founding to 100 years out. And the IPO was one dot in 1 year on that timeline. And we tried to orient the employees to, this is a wonderful event, this IPO, but it's a moment in time on a very long journey.
This is a company that you want to exist in 100 years.
We do.
Wall Street doesn't think in...
No, they think in like hours. Yeah. And what I've learned of Wall Street, and particularly Wall Street investors, when they say they are long-term investors, that means they'll keep your stock for like a month. There has been one instance where I did something that was just for short-term stock, and I felt so bad about it that I don't think I'll do it again.
What was that?
There was one quarter, a few quarters ago, we were not going to beat the quarter. We were going to probably just hit it. And so far, we beat every quarter. So we were all like, wait, what? Our perfect record. We're like a 4.0 student that is going to get a B for the first time. This is not good. And I decided that for a short period of time, at the end of a lesson in our app, we would show 2 ads instead of 1. Turns out that that by itself was good enough to beat the quarter. But it's bad for the product. It's not good. After that, I'm never doing that again.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Crypto.
How do you expect the asset to continue price increase at these levels that we've seen? And at what point do we see, winter coming again?
Winter's not coming back. We're past that phase. If Bitcoin's not going to 0, it's going to $1 million. And you have all the evidence you need to determine that, right? The President of the United States has determined he supports Bitcoin. The Cabinet supports Bitcoin. Scott Bessent supports Bitcoin. Paul Atkins has shown himself to be an enthusiastic believer of Bitcoin and digital assets. Ken Taz at CFTC feels the same way. The banks are going to custody Bitcoin. Bitcoin has gotten through its riskiest period. The accounting has been corrected. There's now only 450 Bitcoin a day available for sale by natural sellers.
Don't miss Bloomberg Crypto live Tuesdays.
The multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, Mondays on Bloomberg.
As Bloomberg's global financial correspondent, I get to meet the people shaping the way money flows around the world. And I want to bring you with me.
The capitalist system is the best system in the world. There isn't another one that works as well.
I love all these new Wall Streets. Y'all Street, Wall Street South.
Wall Street used to be a place. Now it's more of an idea. I hope you survived the day.
I did. It was a busy day.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute economic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in Cape Town, South Africa, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a flying car, or at least the modern approximation of one. And so is this, and this, and this.
Future with Michael J. Fox.
We don't need roads.
The idea of flying cars has been around since, well, cars were invented, basically. Early versions, like the Curtiss autoplane, looked like a Ford Model T with wings attached to it. Unsurprisingly, these early attempts never really got off the ground. But public fascination hasn't waned. Today, a global gaggle of engineers and investors haven't given up on the flying car dream. But as they'll insist, just don't call it a flying car.
It's pretty terrible. It's eVTOL is the way that you say it. Yeah, not the most user-friendly acronym.
eVTOL, it sounds a bit enigmatic. It means electrical vertical takeoff and landing. The name is not maybe very sexy.
Sexy name or not, eVTOLs are a billion-dollar industry. There's some pretty big-name backers who are trying to cash in on this new mode of transportation. The question is, can this new generation of aircraft make it in the world? And do we even want them?
We've seen different types of partnerships emerge. So on the one hand, we have traditional aerospace, but then we also have seen the automotive industry engage.
The eVTOL industry is certainly an emerging industry. It has momentum. It has huge global ambitions. But at the same time, it's an entirely unproven market.
I've been always passionate about flight from a very young age, always looking up to the sky.
Tamaj Patan is the founder and CTO of Jetson, a company that's building a flying car. Sorry, eVTOL.
This is where we keep some of the fleet that is no longer in operation. This one has been testing parachutes for us. Up until the point that one of the tests went sideways, and the whole passenger space is almost intact. So it's a good result of the test, and we have lots of data from it as we had redundant sensors on the vehicle that day. So for 11 years, I've been doing drones with camera gimbals. These drones were getting bigger and bigger. And at some point, I asked myself a question, what if we scale it so I could sit in there and pilot myself?
Yes, switch in.
Probably everyone who first saw Jetson 1 noticed it's not like the rest of the eVTOL. It needs to be exciting. It has to be like a sports car.
Like a luxury sports car or ATV, Jetson's eVTOL is designed for personal use and can't be flown commercially. It's also not cheap. The Jetson 1 could set you back $128,000, and it's sold out through 2026. But not all eVTOLs are designed for personal thrill-seeking. One of the biggest commercial applications for the eVTOL is the air taxi, carrying passengers for short hops across crowded cities. But they have other uses too.
There's a host of other applications beyond that, which could turn into commercial opportunities, talking like perhaps logistics, huge opportunities in cargo. Beyond that, you could go into the military areas, surveillance, reconnaissance, troop deployment on a small scale as well.
And investors are pouring a lot of money into them.
One of the reasons that this industry has drawn so much money, drawn so much investment, is the potential prize on offer. For instance, if you look at estimates from Morgan Stanley, the addressable market could be $1 trillion by 2040.
But what exactly makes an eVTOL? Well, an eVTOL. Let's break it down, shall we? eVTOLs are a new class of aircraft that are able to take off and land vertically and cruise like a plane. And they're electric. That means they're powered by electric propulsion. Here's how it works. Anything that flies relies on 4 forces to move up and through the air. These forces are lift, thrust, drag, and weight. A helicopter takes off and lands vertically, but relies on a single rotor to provide both the lift and thrust needed to fly. eVTOLs run on electric motors instead of jet fuel. The motors are distributed around the aircraft to power rotors and propellers, which provide thrust. And that's where the designs can get a little interesting. eVTOLs all look and fly completely differently. And eVTOLs have a couple of key advantages. They're typically quieter than helicopters. They emit less carbon, in theory anyways. And they're equipped with advanced flight control systems, which means they could be capable of autonomous flight. But we'll get to that later.
It's a fun fact, but our battery alone weighs more than the rest of the vehicle.
Remember, weight. One of the 4 forces that govern flight, it's crucial when it comes to getting anything airborne. And here's the thing, batteries are heavy, which is not great when you're already fighting gravity. It's because batteries have a lower energy density than fuel, which basically means that for their weight, batteries can't store as much energy. For example, you'd need roughly 50 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries to hold as much energy as just 1 kilogram of jet fuel.
Batteries are really critical to this whole equation. To a certain degree, they govern the capability and the performance of these aircraft. The batteries dictate the range, they dictate the power, they dictate the payload, how many people or how much cargo these things can carry, they dictate how fast they can recharge.
In recent years, there have been advancements in alternative sources of energy, like hybrid power and hydrogen. But for now, batteries are our best bet when it comes to electric flight.
In the years since it was first developed in the 1970s, chemists have improved just how much energy each kilogram of a lithium-ion battery can hold. That improvement has been quite linear for the past 3 decades, enabling us to start to put lithium-ion batteries first in electronics like laptops and iPods, and then eventually in electric cars. Some say that there are real upper limits for how much batteries can store in energy for each kilogram of that battery. And that limit shows up in, say, long-haul aviation. If you wanted to build an electric plane that would fly from London to New York, you're unlikely to be able to get a battery that would make that flight economically viable.
It's this limitation that makes eVTOLs suited for shorter trips with lighter loads. And the better that battery tech can get, the more potential they might have.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jumana Versace in Doha, Qatar, and this is Bloomberg.
Addiction isn't a choice.
I would isolate, self-medicate, and fabricate to continue my use.
I didn't really think I had a problem.
Rachel and Pete are just 2 of 48.5 million Americans with substance use disorder. But 3 out of 4 people find recovery is possible with help. Go to shatterproof.org/findtreatment to watch the short film No More Secrets and find out how you can get help. That's shatterproof.org/findtreatment.
We are testing battery cells under aerospace-specific loads. As you can see here, as the aircraft takes off, it goes through a cruise, and then it lands. And what we're really doing is that we're understanding how these guys perform in flight.
One person who is looking into the limits of battery power in electric aviation is Matthew Clark.
We are seeing a lot of eVTOLs in the past, I would say, 2 decades because of the advancements of electric energy storage. Batteries that usually have lower engine densities are reaching the energy densities that can make short routes possible. Unfortunately, right now, many of these cells that are used today limit the range and operation of these aircraft. And as a result, they can only fly maybe 150 nautical miles.
But are batteries where they need to be?
Batteries are getting better every year. Not at the speed that we want them to in the aerospace community, but they're getting better every year. There's going to be a natural progression of checking what I call the illities, the manufacturability, the integrity, all these illities that have to be considered when you're taking any research product to make it a commercial one.
In other words, what's possible now and what's scalable are 2 different things. And while we wait for scientists to improve battery technology, there's no shortage of companies looking to cash in right now.
Let's load flight plan 1063-1, please.
Flight plan 1063-1 in 3, 2.
Archer's aircraft development company that's building a new type of airplane where we're leveraging technology around batteries, electric motors, to develop a brand new type of aircraft.
Everybody ready for flight?
Tower, Archer 1, request clearance to flight plan 1063.
So in the lab here, the process starts with a station where we're taking cells and starting to test them and put them in the battery packs.
Archer is one of the many eVTOL companies globally that's racing to commercialize their aircraft in cities around the world. As of 2025, they had a market valuation of around $4 billion, and investors including Stellantis, United Airlines, BlackRock, just to name a few. They also have contracts with the US military.
We're here at our certification flight simulator in our integrated test lab. The hardware you see here is the real flight hardware from the aircraft, running the real flight software so that we can test with pilots in the loop and exercise the entire system functionality. Our team is just under 1,000 people right now. We have a handful of other facilities where we do manufacturing of the motors and batteries, do system integration testing, and really prove that all the components and systems work together. And then another facility around here where we build our initial aircraft. We've also got a factory that we've just built out in the state of Georgia.
Archer is scaling up. And they're not the only ones. They're not even the only ones in Silicon Valley.
I have a 2-hour commute from where my home is, and so I fly instead of drive because the flight is only 20 minutes instead of a 2-hour drive. So I am a personal use case of how I could use and fly in a Joby aircraft.
Bonnie Simi is the president of operations at Joby Aviation. She's also a former Olympian luge competitor, but that's another story.
Our use case, of course, is in large cities that are very, very congested. Imagine that you're in a congested city in downtown and you need to get to the airport. Let's say it's in New York City. You would think, okay, if I get into a taxi, it's going to take me maybe 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours, you just don't know. Imagine instead you could pull up an app and select a ride to the airport.
Joby, like other eVTOL companies, is banking on the idea of the air taxi. Founded in 2009, they've raised over $2.5 billion in funding so far.
Initially, we were funded through venture funds. Toyota alone has invested almost $1 billion, about $890 million.
One person with an interest in the eVTOL industry is Robin Rydell, a certified commercial pilot who co-leads the McKinsey Center for Future Mobility. Full disclosure, he says he's offered consulting services to several eVTOL companies, but couldn't say which ones because of confidentiality agreements.
The VTOL industry has developed quite a bit over the last, call it, decade or so. And so what we've seen is that industry grow from, small startups that were funded by, a few individuals in some cases, maybe some of the larger companies doing a bit of experimentation in aerospace, into standalone companies.
It's difficult to keep track of just how many eVTOL companies exist in the world today. But there are a few leading the charge. In China, there's companies like EHang and Aerofugia. In Brazil, there's Eve Air Mobility. The US has Joby Aviation, Archer Aviation, Whisk Aero, owned by Boeing, and Beta Technologies. Airbus is in France, and Vertical Aerospace is in the UK. And there's no shortage of big names in the automotive, cargo, and aviation industries getting involved.
If you look at just the eVTOL manufacturers, so the startups and so on that are building these vehicles, we're somewhere between $20 to $25 billion in funding overall. And if you compare that to, traditional aircraft program, that's actually a good chunk of money. That's about, maybe 1 to 2 traditional large aircraft programs worth of funding that we're seeing.
But money isn't a guarantee.
The big conundrum when it comes to the eVTOL industry is that there are billions of dollars being injected into it. There's billions of dollars that have been spent designing and manufacturing these aircraft for a business that has no proven demand.
So fundamentally, eVTOL is still a very early industry. We still don't know if the operations will be viable from a financial point of view. And so this is still a risky investment.
Some companies have already started struggling for funding.
We had Volocopter, for example, in Europe, missed a planned entry into the Paris Olympics. At the end of last year, they filed for insolvency.
And if eVTOLs are ever going to become a reality, there's still one teeny tiny hurdle they'll need to overcome.
Certification and regulation is one of the biggest variables here. And I think a lot of people talk about type certification of the aircraft, which is getting an aircraft certified. But there's a number of other regulations that matter a lot, right? There's operating regulation. For example, how much reserve do you need to leave in your battery to plan for unforeseen events? That hasn't been figured out yet. Or, how do you train pilots for these vehicles, right? What kind of licenses do they need to hold? Or how do you think about what a vertiport needs to look like?
The primary goal is to make a safe aircraft. And then going along with that is getting the aircraft certified. The levels at which we are certifying are comparable to commercial airliners that fly around today. And so whether or not we're flying passengers or cargo like boxes, that level of safety needs to be in the same spot.
As it turns out, it's not so simple to get something certified to fly commercially. And that's probably a good thing. In order for any aircraft to be able to fly, it needs to be regulated and certified. This would be the FAA in the US, EASA in the EU, and the CAAC in China. And eVTOLs are still so new, there weren't even rules for them until recently. In October 2024, the FAA announced the powered lift category for a new class of aircraft, which includes, you guessed it, eVTOLs. It's the first new category for civilian aircraft since helicopters were introduced in the 1940s. But certification, it takes time. While companies like Joby and Archer work with organizations like the FAA towards certification, they're also eyeing places like the UAE to deploy in the meantime. In China, it's forging ahead with its own regulation.
It's a global industry, certainly, but I think that the leaders are more or less represent a North America, China face-off, if you like. And EHang on the other side of the world already has an autonomous vehicle capable of carrying 2 passengers.
All right, let's cut right to it. This is Bloomberg's new show, Primer. Technology is $1 trillion game. Won, lost, won again, just by backing the right science at precisely the right moment.
My life has been focused on how can you elicit intelligence from brain cells in a dish.
This is the fundamental building block of our fusion technology.
We're doing things that have never been done by anybody, ever.
Everyone is selling the future. If you want to understand what's coming, you'll want to watch Primer, because details matter.
Lasers on?
So do lasers.
There we go.
Oh, and it's on all these lovely channels. Hope you're jotting this down.
I'm David Weston. Join me for the next generation of Wall Street Week. This week, Vlad Tenev of Robinhood takes us into the wild world of mathematical superintelligence. We go to Saudi Arabia for the story of Aramco's plan to help wean the kingdom off of oil.
We think of ourselves as a technology company delivering energy. We are very pragmatic here in the kingdom.
And Larry Summers dissects the Fed's latest decision. Watch the all-new Wall Street Week. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
We're at the epicenter of a global realignment on a scale not seen for decades. At the intersection between markets, economics, and geopolitics, a forum for sophisticated conversation. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Remember autonomous flight? Like their electric land-based counterparts, one of the appeals of eVTOLs being electric is that there's potential to take the pilot out of the equation entirely.
EHang in China is right at the front end of autonomous eVTOL flight, which is remarkable. And we're some way off that situation in other parts of the world.
Many companies looking to launch eVTOLs commercially are starting out with pilots on board. But China-based EHang is moving forward with autonomous flight, straight out of the gate. They say their 2-seat eVTOL has completed pilotless flights across 19 countries.
I'm about to step into a flying taxi, and if that's not radical enough for you, this one has no pilot.
In the air, please do not touch the door.
Okay. I can't believe I'm doing this and that there's nobody flying this. We're about to lift off. It's quite exciting, but here we go. It's a bit noisier than I expected, and I won't be looking down too much because I am afraid of heights, but right now it feels very safe.
My colleague did take a flight in the EHang autonomous eVTOL, which is like a little bubble, and he described the experience as slightly unnerving, you're slightly exposed, noisier than expected, but something that he got used to by the end of the flight. When you think about it, it's a very novel experience getting in an aircraft with no pilot. That's something that even the eVTOL manufacturers admit will take time to, I guess, win over people's trust. We've been accustomed to flying with a pilot for 100 years.
Pilot it or not, people are going to have to trust flying in an eVTOL, and safety is a big part of that.
Safety concerns surrounding the eVTOL industry are similar to every kind of air travel industry. Are these aircraft safe? Are they reliable? And if there's no pilot in the front, are they going to be able to deal with unexpected emergencies?
Air taxi 75, entering control zone is approved.
Delta 6 to Delta 1, holding short line.
There's a lot of air traffic already going on. Here in the middle, you see the airport of Hamburg, where we are. One runway to the north, where we have an aircraft waiting for departure. The Ryanair is just landing. And then all these labels, which say ATMC something, these are all air taxis. And they're all coming to the airport or from the airport from different places in the city center. And here you see a landing happening just now.
Before the real-life scramble of introducing unmanned air taxis to the skies, the DLR Institute of Flight Guidance at the German Aerospace Center is offering a peek into the future of air travel, all from the comfort of a simulation.
What we have seen earlier was the working position of an air traffic controller in a tower at an airport. So that would be the very near future, where we have probably piloted air taxis that can do voice communication with a human controller in the tower. And what we see here is a little bit more into the future. We have no voice communications with the vehicle directly. There's no pilot on board. So we do all digital here through the control systems.
eVTOLs are going to need to do a lot more than just fly. They're going to need a place to land. They'll need to be able to navigate air traffic and cities with lots of people.
Urban air mobility or innovative air mobility, that is the broader term for the whole ecosystem. So we have to think about the vehicle, the infrastructure, the operation, but also about the public acceptance. If you want to have flying eVTOLs in cities, first of all, you need a vertiport, because that is the landing site where we would expect eVTOLs to start and land. And then when you think about more the operational aspect, there are challenges like bird strikes, other flying vehicles, hobby drones, fireworks. That would be a challenge. And the last challenge is, of course, the weather. Probably not all of the eVTOLs we currently see as prototypes will be capable of flying in really bad weather.
Flying cars may still be a long way off, but eVTOLs are very much here. But when, where, how, and even if we see them shuttling people around the skies is still a big question.
There are a lot of issues that need to be addressed before eVTOLs take flight, but I have no doubt that you will see them. I mean, they are flying already, but most of these flights are demo flights.
Within the next few years, it's very likely that we will see commercial eVTOL operations, but they will start with very few numbers in a few example cities.
One of the more interesting things I've heard recently is the future's already here, it's just not equally distributed. And I think this will very much apply to eVTOL, it does. Don't forget, even though all of us now have smartphones, that was a 30-year journey to get there. So this technology, even though it's here, it won't be here for everybody from the beginning.
We could see these companies rewrite urban transit maps around the world if they can offer a new form of air travel that's convenient and that's affordable. At the same time, it could just fizzle into a niche market only within reach of the very richest travelers, and in the process burn up billions of dollars of invested capital.
Was it easy to get the pandas to come back to Washington, D.C.? Did the Chinese say, we have some extra pandas, we don't know what to do with them, we're going to give them to you?
Well, it was a little more difficult than that. It probably took us, it was about over the course of a year where we had conversations with our colleagues in China, and we were able to get pandas here very quickly. I think it's a testament to the relationship we've built over decades, to the conservation success that we've had, here with our pandas and our panda program. And so it was a lot of conversations, but I think we always knew in the end that we did want pandas at the National Zoo.
How many pandas are there in the entire world?
So this is incredible because this is all due to this panda program, and this is so important. So when we started with giant pandas 50 years ago, there were fewer than 1,000 pandas in the world, right? We're talking in the wild and zoos, fewer than 1,000. And decades later, there are close to 2,000 pandas in the wild now. Actually, I think a little over 1,800. There are over 700 pandas in breeding centers. So as part of this program, we have tripled the number of pandas on the planet.
But still a small number of pandas.
Because of this program, there are more pandas on the planet, more quality panda habitat in the wild, and pandas have gone from being endangered to being vulnerable.
I'm Alex Rodriguez.
And I'm Jason Kelly.
And we're back with more episodes of our show, The Deal.
The theme of this season, On the Road. We're bringing you more behind-the-scenes conversations with the biggest names in sports, business, and culture, like Melody Hobson.
I started to study women's sports like an 11-year-old studies baseball statistics, and I got dangerous in seeing up arrows.
Susie Wolf.
When you're competing, you're not thinking about any fear or any worries of what could happen.
Josh Harris.
You can't do a good deal with a bad person.
Jay Batt.
At the end of the day, there's never been a better time to be a student athlete.
And more. Stay tuned.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Open Interest, this data from Trump's trade war, what are you seeing in your district?
Businesses are afraid to accelerate. By and large, they're pulling over and putting on the hazards.
You're constantly speaking to businesses. Is anyone making big investments?
Inflation is a